How is it that a bunch of tweets from almost 10 years prior altered the trajectory of the two biggest movie studios and led to this year's head-to-head showdown between two of the most anticipated superhero films in recent years? It's a real the butterfly effect situation, and I mean the actual effect, not the terrible Ashton Kutcher movie. Anyway, let's go on. The story starts in 2018. Well, actually, it technically starts in 2009, but I'm trying to simplify things a little bit here. In 2018, James Gunn was in a pretty good place in his career. He had directed and co-written two of the most critically acclaimed and highest-grossing Marvel films in Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, as well as an executive producer role for two of the highest-grossing films of all time in Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame. Plans were already in motion for Gunn to do the third Guardians film, and it's fair to say that his recent success would have opened many more doors within Marvel and Disney, like maybe a Howard the Duck reboot. Around this time, Gunn had also been a very vocal critic of then and current President Trump, which somewhat put him in the crosshairs of right-wing media and commentators. Because, as we all know, politicians should not be criticized at all. It's very normal to think that, and definitely not cult-like behavior. Gunn then went on to call Trump a foreign operative, criticized his administration for the treatment of immigrant children, and accused the GOP of being corrupt. It was these comments that apparently caught the eye of right-wing provocateur Mike Cernovich. And if you're wondering what a provocateur means, basically it's a polite way of saying words that I'm not allowed to use on YouTube. Cernovich had recently been pointed in the direction of some controversial tweets that Gunn had made around 2009, and began an online campaign to bring these tweets back to the public eye as revenge for Gunn being mean to his political team. Now, I'm obviously not going to read out or show the tweets because, honestly, I have no idea what YouTube allows. You can easily look them up if you want to read them. Essentially, they are dark jokes that are barely jokes. Gunn himself said as much when he issued an apology in response, in which he said, "My words of nearly a decade ago were, at the time, totally failed and unfortunate efforts to be provocative." Unfortunately for Gunn, on the 20th of July 2018, Disney announced that they were severing their business relationship with him, specifically because the offensive attitudes and statements discovered on James's Twitter feed are indefensible and inconsistent with our studio's values. Anyway, I'm not here to say whether it's right or wrong that Disney fired Gunn as a response to almost decade-old tweets. All I'm saying is, I highly doubt that one of the biggest media companies in the world would have hired someone to write and direct films as part of one of their biggest franchises without thoroughly investigating them beforehand. Just a guess on my part, but I reckon they knew about the tweets and didn't consider them an issue, especially because they were out in the open and no one was talking about them. That is until people started talking about them. The reason that the tweets went viral was not just because a right-wing personality had a temper tantrum, it's also because of the rise of the Me Too movement and the related high-profile cases of confirmed creeps such as Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby. Essentially, Disney feared that not clearly punishing Gunn for his tweets would lead to some kind of backlash or boycott that might hurt their bottom line, which, just to be very clear, is every big company's only ever value. The other reason that Disney obviously didn't really care about the tweet is that Gunn would eventually return to direct Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which, according to Gunn, Disney approached him about later that very same year. So, the plan was obviously always to fire him for a bit, wait for the public reaction to die down, then get him back like nothing ever happened. Except, something very important did happen in that time. Before the ink had even dried on Gunn's exit settlement deal with Marvel, he was quickly approached by Warner Brothers to make any DC superhero film. That might sound like an exaggeration, but Gunn has since confirmed that the first character they offered him was Superman, who, if somehow you didn't know, is somewhat of a big deal for DC. This tracks with where the DC Extended Universe was at the time. The critical response was mixed, with Wonder Woman being the only positively reviewed film, Man of Steel just about passing with a mixed status, and the less said about the rest of the films the better. Of course, there are still plenty of Zack Snyder fans out there who believe all these films are underappreciated masterpieces, and their opinions are just as valid as everyone else's. Please don't come after me. The point being, Warner Brothers were expecting an MCU level of success both critically and commercially. Remember, this was just after Infinity War had been released. And those results had not been met. So it makes complete sense why they were reportedly offering the world to one of the MCU's most critically acclaimed writers/directors. Gunn said himself that he wasn't sure about jumping straight into Superman, possibly because there were still plans for a Man of Steel sequel with Henry Cavill still attached. Instead, DC offered him basically any characters he wanted. So he went with one of his favorite comic book teams, the Suicide Squad. And if you also like comics, then you should definitely check out the Comic Literate podcast, in which we do deep dives into comic books, at least when we're not distracted by unrelated tangents. Links in the description. For the next few years, Gunn would be working on making a new Suicide Squad film for DC. It was somewhat of a soft reboot for the franchise because, while the previous one had been poorly received critically, he still wanted to carry over some of the best parts of it, like Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, Viola Davis's Amanda Waller, and Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag. Anyway, fast forward to August 2021. Remember earlier when I said I was trying to keep this simple? And The Suicide Squad is released to a very positive critic and audience response. However, box office for the film is not so good. Some say it's because it was released while the pandemic was still technically ongoing. Some say it's because it was added to streaming on HBO Max so quickly. Personally, I think releasing a sequel to a film that was critically panned, with a title that's only distinguishable from the previous film by the inclusion of the word "the," might not encourage your average cinema goer enough to give it a chance. But hey, what do I know? I'm clearly not as smart as the top minds of Warner Bros. Regardless of the lacking box office for the film, the positive critical response was enough for Warner Bros. To want Gunn to work on more projects for the DC cinematic franchise. And even more than that, as we would later find out. However, as I mentioned earlier, Disney had already offered Gunn the opportunity to return to Marvel to finish his Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. Obviously, this series and everything he had planned for the third film were very important to Gunn, so it's no surprise that he accepted this offer and made yet another critical and commercial success for the MCU. But the seeds were already sowed for the penultimate stage of the story. In April 2022, Discovery Incorporated and Warner Media merged to become Warner Bros. Discovery, led by President and CEO David Zaslav. This part might sound boring, and that's because it is. But this is what led to Warner Bros. Discovery completely restructuring the DC film franchise arm of the company, which meant they began their search for a Kevin Feige equivalent for DC. Basically someone to oversee the creative direction of the entire franchise, which they really needed at the time because DC films had continued to underperform. Now, while all this was happening, we would later find out from Gunn himself that he had already been hired by DC to write the new Superman film, which was loosely thought of as a sequel to 2013's Man of Steel. So while everyone in the entertainment media at the time was speculating about all the different film producers who might be winning the golden ticket from Wonka Zaslav, turns out old Charlie Gunn was toiling away in the Warner Brothers basement in bed with his 4 grandparents. This metaphor really got away from me. So, in October 2022, the entertainment industry was shocked by the announcement that the new heads of DC's film, TV, and animation division were James Gunn and some guy called Peter Safran. They were announced as co-chairs of the division, with Gunn focusing on the creative side of the work and Safran taking the lead on the business and production side of it all. I joked earlier, but Safran was already an experienced producer on a few DC films, including Gunn's Suicide Squad. Gunn and Safran also go way back, with Safran starting out as a manager and Gunn being one of his clients for many years. In the following months, they would drip-feed some of their plans for the new wider DC film universe, as well as specifics about the upcoming Superman film, such as announcing publicly that Gunn was writing it, then confirming that he would be directing it, and that they would be presenting a new, younger version of the character, and therefore would not be bringing Henry Cavill back. Sorry, Cavill, at least you still got the Witcher series to... Oh, right, yeah. What about that Warhammer thing? Yeah, there you go. Finally something goes right for the rich, famous, handsome guy. We fast forward to present day, or for anyone watching this long after this stuff actually matters, we arrive at summer of 2025. Superman is set to release on the 11th of July. There's already been a highly positive fan reaction to the teasers and trailers that have been dropped so far, which means people are pretty excited for it. But here's the thing! Imagine if I just ended the video right there. It's not the only highly anticipated superhero film that's coming out this summer, or even the month of July. Just one fortnight after Superman's release, or 2 weeks for the Americans, we get Fantastic Four: First Steps. To casual fans, 2 superhero films releasing in the same month might not seem like a big deal. But in the same way that Superman has a lot riding on it as the first film of the new DCU era, so too does Fantastic Four. Mainly because Marvel have had a bit of their own creative and commercial slump in recent years. Some films have still had success, like Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But the critical and commercial failures of The Eternals, The Marvels, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania meant that fans no longer considered the MCU to be a guaranteed hitmaker anymore. And that's not even getting into the hits and bombs of the television side of the studio. Essentially, both sides could really do with a hit. DC want to show everyone that the start of this new film universe is good, and Marvel want to show everyone that they've still got it, especially after the creative shakeups they had behind the scenes. And while loser fans like myself might queue up to watch both films on their opening nights, the more casual cinema goers might choose only one of these films for their culturally mandated once every 3 month superhero movie. So there's a real chance that only one of these films could dominate the box office. Or they'll both do great and this whole video was a waste of time. And to tie this all back in with the original point of this video, if Disney hadn't performatively fired Gunn for his old tweets while fully intending to bring him back as soon as the dust had settled, then maybe he wouldn't have got immediately scooped up by Warner Brothers, and maybe he wouldn't have been in the running for creative head of DC Films, and maybe Disney wouldn't now be going head to head with one of their own former and most successful directors. A director who made most of his success working on superhero team films. And what kind of superhero film are Disney now putting up against DC Superman? One that, in an alternate yet similar universe, could have been helmed by a James Gunn who was never kicked out of Disney. But hey, that's just a... Wait, no, that's a different channel, never mind. But at the end of the day, us superhero fanatics get to enjoy 2 big summer blockbusters that look like they should be at least pretty good. So let me know down in the comments below which one you're most looking forward to, if either. And while you're down there, please hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and hit subscribe to be notified when I eventually make another one, because I have no idea when that will be. But if you can't wait for that, then you should check out the Comic Literate podcast, which I co-host and is linked in the description. Thank you, goodbye.